America Makes Game Day here at Rapid Plus TCT. I'm here to talk about 3D printed construction with two experts in the space. So if you could both maybe introduce yourself, start with Gene.
Sure, pleasure to be here, John. So I'm Gene Eidelman, I'm co-founder of Azure Printed Homes, and we are our first company to 3D print homes with recycled plastic.
Hi, this is DiMarco. I'm from Ohio State University. I am a principal engineer and our additive manufacturing technology leader. We just started in this space of construction and automated construction. We unveiled a partnership with Cobot and Pantheon Innovative Builders last month. We had about 300 people attend and visit OSU and worked with America Makes on that event. So excited to talk about this today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for stopping by today. I haven't seen much printed construction on the floor yet this year, but I think it's coming. So this is a very fascinating topic. I've been engaged in the topic for years. We've talked in the past. I actually was part of some work with NASA 8 or so years ago. Have seen levels of interest come and go in this, particularly within the U.S. But I specifically don't necessarily want to talk about printing on habitats for the moon or Mars, but how do we actually get to a tipping point in the U.S. for printed construction to become meaningful? I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about what each of you is doing. There are two different approaches to that. So if you could maybe just give a little introduction to the process for everyone who's listening.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question for me. I'm primarily from the automotive and aerospace industry originally, and 3D printing is what I do every day. And so at OSU, when we were discussing construction 3D printing, when I brought the subject to our team, I said, hey, if we want to be experts in the field of 3D printing, why aren't we doing 3D printed construction? Whether it's with plastic or metals or concrete, we should be looking at this. And so we started talking about it about 2 years ago. And for us, we're looking at ways to increase automation, standardization, and ultimately find ways for it to become adopted and applied in the United States.
Okay. Yeah, so we started looking at it about the same time, a couple of years ago. My business partner and I are general contractors. We just got sick and tired of missing the timelines and building over budget and all the waste that our construction generates. So we said we got to figure out a way to do it better and faster. And so we, at that time already, we saw some companies building with cement. And I have 3 kids. I don't want to go to Mars. I want to live here on Earth. I'm from Ukraine, so being here in America is good. Yeah. And so we really said, how can we do something that's sustainable? And cement, of course, is the worst polluter. When people say that 40% of CO2 comes from buildings, cement is a big piece of it, some 25% of it. So we kind of ruled out cement. And when we ruled out cement, then there was nothing else, right? So first of all, we said, let's build in a factory, because when you build on site, be it the old-fashioned way or with cement, there are all kinds of delays. Rains, too cold, too hot. And so we wanted to be much more cost efficient. So we determined we're going to do it in a factory. And second, we said, why can't we do it with recycled plastic? Automotive and aerospace use plastic. So can we look at how to achieve the properties that we need to get the building permit and build? After 2 years, we incorporated our company just 14 months ago, printed a couple models last year, and middle of April, we started to produce unit a day and started typing for years. And here we have unbelievable demand. Now we're getting at scale. We still can be a lot better at this, but yeah, just incredible product market fit and make an impact and achieve some scale.
I think one thing interesting, and thank you both, so two different approaches, both trying to fundamentally address a problem of affordable housing in the US. and making it available at scale. You know, like a lot of the things in our industry, and you know, specifically thinking about additive manufacturing, you know, we have tech problems that we need to overcome. You know, first understand and then overcome. We have education and workforce development problems. So when we introduce these new technologies, in case you haven't noticed, the construction industry it's evolved dramatically, so in ways, but in other ways it hasn't, from a workforce point of view, and just understanding and just changing the way a trade is being done. And then there's the I don't know which of these is the hardest, probably not the technology side, is the ecosystem. How do you build the community that's interested first to accept this, and then built around these new technologies being implemented? So Ben, you know, you sit within a academic research facility. You know, you're not necessarily set up to scale up to produce thousands of units or something like that. You're fundamentally applying and developing research so that someone can take it and ultimately transition it to the marketplace. Can you talk a little bit about some of what you're doing and areas you're looking to address 3D printed construction? So I think of, you know, maybe a point as far as the CO2 emissions. I know you guys are working quite a bit on different formulations. So, and I know there's some work going on at the national labs where it is known that it is a high producer. But there, like anything else, there are things that can be done to address that. You know, it's not going to eliminate it, but if a structure also lives for hundreds of years, you know, there's a total life cycle cost offset there that we can consider. So can you talk a little bit about how, you know, you're months into the journey, you've got a system up online, and you're starting to prove it out. You know, what's the now, near, long-term goals here at the academic institution?
Yeah, so how we got our start 2 years ago was just calling people in the industry and asking a lot of different people what they're doing and why they're doing it. So actually that's how I met Gene. We just had a phone call a couple years ago, and I called Icon and Cobot and all of these different companies to ask how they're doing it. And then I actually went to a 3D printed house in Arizona, and I saw the material testing first, and then I saw an actual printed house. And that's really where I actually said, hey, this is possible. And again, I'm a 3D printing guy, not necessarily a concrete or materials expert, so I went up immediately and just touched the 3D printing interface and started pushing some buttons, and I said, hey, this is actually similar to some of our other printers that we have on the shop floor. So immediately I came back to OSU and I started calling experts in our ecosystem of OSU. So Dr. Lisa Burris is looking at materials, Halil Sizen is looking at structures and actual reinforcement and civil structures. We included architecture, and even with Justin Dials in architecture, and then finally Jason Reese in community planning. So we don't want this to be, hey, we're just 3D printing experts. We want this to be a holistic approach, and so each of us is taking a different focus area. And for our group, and I don't want to say we're only doing concrete or we're only doing mortar or cement, we're looking at all materials. So potentially, we'd be interested in putting plastic into the mix where it makes sense, or we'd be interested in some small fibers, fly ash, more sustainable materials. And most recently, we gave a pitch to the DoD and the point of need in using locally available materials like clay and things that we can just dig up from the ground. So we're trying to take a holistic approach, and I think it's a large mountain to climb, but we have a nice team and a good team of really smart practitioners that can help accelerate this forward, and I think that's going to help everyone, including Gene and Azure and their venture too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, so our journey was very similar. We started calling people, and you know, it's the first impression you get from some people that makes up your mind. So we heard from somebody who leased one of these large format printers, and they said, it's not working. You know, it's raining today, all of our workers on site, and there is nothing that can be done. You know, and I started thinking about it. Again, I think what helped us, the fact that we're look at all the 3D printing home startups, we might be the only ones who come from the construction industry. Everybody else comes from the 3D printing industry, robotics, right? And so we were very practical. It's like, you know, we know what the problems are printing on site. I don't want to have now expensive equipment that have the same problems. To answer one of your earlier questions in terms of adoption, it's been unbelievable. This is my third startup. And in the previous two, you have an idea, you make it, and then you start marketing it. In this one, we put up 14 months ago an image on Facebook. Our total marketing spend was $7,500, and we have over $26 million of orders. So the enthusiasm from people who love 3D printing, people who love sustainability, people who just love things cheaper and faster, right? If there is a big group out there of that, it's been unbelievable. I mean, it's the power of really having a right product market fit when you have a vision for something that's good looking, that you really have thought through. So the timing is right. I'm afraid to know what will happen if we were to start marketing, because we only have now one printer, and we can make only $8 to $10 million of structures per year. So I'm riding around here raising money to be able to fulfill the orders. Again, I just think it's great that OSU is doing, or the Ohio State is doing the research in the, in other materials, because I really believe we gotta find sustainable materials. Yeah, I think if we can do all of those things and do it sustainably, I think that's going to be the win-win.
Yeah, I think one big takeaway from me, and I across, regularly across different AM technologies, we're in the same position. It's not about whether approach A or B or C is the only right approach. Yeah. We're in a position where, like you said, there's tremendous enthusiasm. There's maybe most importantly, a bigger need out there that we have to find solutions. Neither of your solutions is the singular solution. So we have to find multiple solutions to address this problem space that we're in. And I think it's exciting because there's so much interest within the space. So it's easy to let your mind wander. It happens to me pretty regularly when I think of this, AM construction space. However, there's real world considerations. We regularly talk about the, realities of additive manufacturing. Just because we can do things, it doesn't necessarily mean we should, or that we know how to do it at scale. I mean, scale is a big piece of this, and enthusiasm for me wanting a home versus the people who are in the position to actually manufacture and make the home existing and transitioning from their current work to this new workforce are very different things. So I wonder if you could talk a little, maybe as you're doing this right now, what kind of reaction have you had, or you're, being a general contractor, from the, I'll generically say, the trade space? Is this something they're ready for, do you think?
Ready and enthusiastic about it. The shortage of labor in construction industry is such that nobody worries, so there's going to be enough jobs. I mean, we have over 5.2 million shortage of housing just in this country. Canada, Australia, and New Zealand per capita have even higher shortages than we do, if you can imagine it. There are over 500,000 homeless in this country, 70,000 homeless in LA. So the need is so great that trades are not afraid that they're not going to have enough jobs. And we transitioned our teams from working on site to working in the buildings. They love it. They love consistency. They love the fact that homeowner doesn't have a dog that attacks them every time they go in and out. They love professional environment. They love ability to see the latest technology. I mean, it's been incredible. I mean, now when we have to send some guys to actually install our units inside, we have difficulty finding them because they like to come to a factory, get it done, move on.
Yeah, manufacturing in an office environment. I mean, I think it's one of the major advantages additive manufacturing has. I was at a debate last week between castings and additive, and somebody brought up the comment of they're wildly different industries, specifically in the environment that you operate in.
Right.
So maybe you can, Ben, talk a little bit about the up and coming workforce. So I know you guys employ, through the CDME, a tremendous number of college undergrads in particular, but maybe more importantly than whether that's 10 or 100, what are you seeing as far as interest level in getting engaged in this moving forward versus, how many of them do you think would have considered going into, not necessarily trades, but getting involved in the construction industry? I'd have to think it's pretty dramatic difference.
Yeah, this is actually one of the top 3 reasons why I chose to champion this at OSU. So I'll start with a question to both of you and say, hey, do you know how old the average construction worker age is in the United States? John, what would be your guess?
52.
50s, 60s.
Yeah, so I need to actually get my source site, but it's about 46 to 48 years old today, the average construction worker age is. And for me, in academia with these young, enthusiastic students, hey, do you want to go pour concrete and build a house, or do you want to go work in an office? And for them, probably they're going to choose the office before the trade. So 3D printing brings an opportunity to bring in this young and new wave of workforce. So at CDME, we employed 135 undergraduates on payroll this past semester. So we pay them, they work about 15 hours per week. In the additive group alone, we have 60 students that are interested in working in additive. And I have a handful, maybe about 5 students that are interested in this construction 3D printing or large format additive manufacturing, and we're getting buy-in. They are solving the problems with the printer. One, we just hired a materials science student. He wants to work for Quikrete someday and design new mixtures of materials. So we're seeing this wave of excitement because they've had these plastic printers at home for the last 3 or 4 years. They're printing little figures, and now we can tell them, hey, we can actually print something as large as your home. And to them, then the light bulb goes on that this is pretty interesting, and they get excited about it. And so now it's engaging that new workforce, as well as making sure the curriculum, whether it's in high school or in the university or in the trade setting, is ready to pull them in and bring them into the industry. Because if your average age in that industry is 46 to 48, there's going to be a fall off in 10 years. So I think it's important to think about that.
Yeah, no, as someone who fits into that demographic, I certainly don't want to move bags of concrete much. From the very limited amount of it I've done, it's a lot of work. So I think as we kind of close up, the fascinating topic, and it's just the beginning of this conversation, I truly think we will see it's to start transitioning out to the floor here, where more and more people are going to start to understand the opportunity and kind of build excitement around that. What's your hot takeaway, most excited for within the next 2 years coming out of this industry?
Scale. Last year in the United States, there were 10 homes 3D printed. In the last 2 weeks, we printed 6 of them in our factory. So there is going to be scale. There's need for scale. We need to solve housing problems. We need to solve problems for the unhoused. So that's what I'm most excited about. And bringing the cost down. I mean, with increasing interest rates, there is even a further need to bring the cost down. So that's, and finally sustainability. For the future of the planet, let's figure out a way. Construction shouldn't be second to automotive in being a polluter. And automotive does something about it very practical. So I almost want to see construction being the worst polluter industry. So let's figure out how to accomplish all those things.
Yeah, I think the 2-year charge is adoption and bringing more recognition and more focus to this 3D printing technology. So I've had friends say, hey, I thought you liked metal 3D printing and motorsports and aerospace. Well, I'm still doing that. But as a leader at Ohio State, my mission is let's increase adoption to 3D printing where it makes sense. So I say for the next 2 years, if we can bring more attention to this 3D printed and automated construction industry, whatever material or machine that is, I'm excited about that, increase in adoption.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. Really, really appreciate it. We'll be checking back. I think this is a exciting topic that I know from a institute's point of view, we see the curve kind of on the upswing, and trying to figure out how do we get engaged, how do we help build that story for the community as a whole, and it's going to have to include both of you. So appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, John. America Makes, appreciate it.